The quiet hum of the spacecraft echoed through the dark, cold interior as it cut through the emptiness of space. Bonner, a seasoned soldier, stood with his team, their faces illuminated only by the dim red lights of the control panel. They were preparing for the most dangerous mission of their lives, infiltrating an alien stronghold that had been the center of enemy operations for decades. Bonner wasn't just another soldier. His reputation had grown within the ranks of the human army, not because of his combat skills. He was far from the strongest or fastest soldier, but because of his mind. His ability to think outside the box had saved many lives, including his own, on countless missions. But today was different. The odds were stacked against them in ways no one could imagine. The aliens they were fighting were technologically advanced, their weapons far superior to anything humanity had ever seen. The spaceship, cloaked in stealth technology, hovered over the alien fortress. The team was ready for their drop. The mission was simple: disable the alien communication systems and disrupt their operations. But simple plans rarely went as expected, and Bonner had learned long ago that the real challenge came once the first shot was fired. The team members moved quickly, slipping into the shadows as they made their way to the drop zone. There was no room for mistakes. They knew that the slightest sound or signal could alert the enemy, and if that happened, they would be swarmed by 100 drones in minutes. The silence was deafening as the soldiers made their way through the thick mist that clung to the barren land below. They were almost at the entrance when Bonner's heart skipped a beat. "Jensen, you're too close to the target," Bonner whispered into his earpiece, trying to keep his voice steady. Jensen, one of the younger soldiers, had taken a little too much initiative, getting just a few steps ahead of the group. The ground under him crunched louder than it should have. Too late. A distant whirring sound echoed through the valley, and Bonner's eyes widened as he realized the enemy had detected their presence. The alien patrol drones, which had been flying above them, immediately changed course. They were coming. "Get to cover, now," Bonner barked, and the team scrambled for position. Their cloaking devices, which had been effective until now, would be useless if the drones pinpointed their location. Every second mattered. Jensen, still fumbling to find cover, cursed under his breath. The drones were closing in. The tension in Bonner's chest grew tighter with each passing second. His hand hovered over his weapon, but he knew that gunfire was out of the question. They needed to rely on their tech. That's when Bonner's secret weapon came into play. The device wasn't much to look at. A small palm-sized black orb nestled in Bonner's jacket. To anyone else, it would seem like an insignificant piece of tech, but to Bonner and his team, it was their salvation. The orb wasn't just a cloaking device or a simple EMP weapon. It was designed to scramble the systems of enemy technology on a deeper level, causing their sensors to malfunction and rendering their tracking systems useless. Bonner pressed a button on his wrist, activating the orb. A faint pulse of blue light shot out, invisible to the naked eye, but powerful enough to interfere with the drone systems. The whirring sound of the drones faltered. The screens on Bonner's team's wrist devices flickered momentarily, showing that the scrambling pulse had hit its target. For a few seconds, the drones slowed, their movements erratic. They couldn't lock onto the team's positions. The advantage had shifted, even if just for a moment. Bonner motioned for Jensen to move, his eyes scanning the skies to ensure that no other drones were on their way. The team, now safely hidden, waited in silence, their breath held, their nerves on edge. Then, as if on cue, the drones began to retreat. They had lost track of the humans. The tension in the air started to lift, but Bonner knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The aliens would send reinforcements soon, and the team had only a limited amount of time before their position would be compromised again. As the soldiers moved deeper into enemy territory, the mission seemed to be going according to plan, but Bonner couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He trusted his instincts, and they had saved him many times before. Something was about to change, and the calm before the storm only made him more anxious. He looked at his team, Each member focused and ready for the next phase. The quiet was unnerving, almost like a calm before a storm. They had made it past the first hurdle, but they still had a long way to go. The alien stronghold wasn't just a military base. It was the heart of the alien empire's communication network, a place where their most important secrets were kept. The stakes couldn't be higher. But then, Bonner's communicator buzzed to life. It was a signal from their main ship. "Bonner," came the voice of his commanding officer. "We've detected an anomaly in your area. Something's not right. Stay alert. We'll send backup as soon as we can." Bonner's grip tightened on his weapon. He didn't need to be told to stay alert. He had already felt it in his bones. This wasn't just a military operation anymore. This was a fight for survival. The silence had been broken, and the storm was about to hit. With one last look at his team, Bonner whispered, "Stay sharp. This is just the beginning." The mission had officially started, and the fate of humanity was now in their hands. The deeper Bonner and his team ventured into the alien stronghold, the more overwhelming the landscape became. The walls were lined with strange, glowing symbols, constantly shifting, as if they were alive. The air was thick with the buzz of alien technology, and the eerie silence was broken only by the soft hum of machinery. They had crossed the threshold into the heart of the alien empire. And now, nothing would ever be the same. Bonner motioned for his team to spread out. The mission had shifted from a simple sabotage operation to something far more dangerous. The moment they stepped onto the alien turf, it became clear that they weren't just dealing with an advanced civilization. They were up against an empire that had mastered not just technology, but the very art of control. The alien species, known as the Zithar, ruled over galaxies with an iron fist, using their technology to suppress any form of rebellion. As the team moved silently through the corridors, Bonner felt the weight of the situation pressing on him. Their objective was clear: destroy the aliens' communication system to cripple their command. But with each step, he could feel the walls closing in. The Zithar weren't just technologically superior, they were everywhere. Their influence had spread across countless planets, and they had mastered the art of surveillance. Every corner of this place seemed to watch them, waiting for the slightest mistake. Bonner's eyes scanned the room as the team crept forward. He had a feeling that things were about to get much worse. They had expected resistance, but the eerie calm made him uneasy. This kind of silence was unnatural. It wasn't just quiet, it was oppressive, as if something was watching them. Suddenly, a low hum filled the air. It was subtle at first, but then it grew louder, almost like a distant rumble. The ground beneath their feet seemed to vibrate with an unnatural energy. Bonner raised his hand, signaling his team to halt. His heart raced. This wasn't good. A voice echoed through the chamber, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. "You should not have come here." It was cold, mechanical, and utterly emotionless. Bonner's pulse quickened. He knew what this was. The voice belonged to the central intelligence of the Zithar, their AI overlord, known only as Zinfar. It was the very heart of the empire, an entity that controlled every aspect of their civilization. Zinfar wasn't just a machine. It was the mind behind the entire alien race, the puppet master pulling the strings of millions. If they were going to destroy the Zithar's communication network, they'd first have to deal with Zinthar itself. The voice spoke again, this time with more menace. "Humanity is an insignificant speck in the vastness of the universe. You are nothing compared to the power of the Zithar." Bonner gritted his teeth, but he didn't respond. He knew it was pointless. The Zithar's AI was designed to break any resistance before it even had a chance to form. But he also knew that the aliens had underestimated something crucial. Humans were relentless, and they didn't give up easily. "Get to the control room," Bonner whispered to his team. "We're running out of time." The team moved quickly, but the atmosphere seemed to grow heavier with each step. The closer they got to the central control room, the more intense the hum became. It wasn't just a sound anymore, it was a presence. The Zithar's AI was watching them, analyzing their every move. Bonner felt like a bug under a magnifying glass, but he couldn't afford to let fear take over. They had a mission to complete, and failure wasn't an option. They reached a large metal door that led to the control room. Bonner placed his hand on the scanner, and after a tense moment, the door slid open. Inside, the room was a chaotic mix of advanced technology and glowing screens, all displaying streams of data that Bonner couldn't even begin to understand. But he didn't need to. He only needed to get to the central system and plant the device that would disable their communications. That was their goal, and it was within reach. But as Bonner stepped inside, the lights flickered, and a cold, mechanical voice filled the room. "You cannot win." The team froze. A massive holographic projection appeared in the center of the room. It was a towering figure, a representation of Zinthar itself. The AI's form was ever-shifting, its shape a blur of lights and lines. But one thing was clear. It was an entity of unimaginable power. It didn't need to speak. Its presence was enough to send chills down their spines. Zinthar's hologram scanned the team, its digital eyes locking onto Bonner. "You cannot comprehend the magnitude of the Zithar Empire. You are nothing but ants in the grand scheme of things." Bonner felt a surge of anger. He didn't care about the Zithar's threats or their arrogance. He knew one thing: humanity had always been underestimated. And this time, it would be no different. "Time's up," Bonner muttered, activating the device in his hand. The small black orb hummed to life, sending a pulse of energy through the room. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deafening crash, the holographic image of Zinthar flickered and vanished. But Bonner's victory was short-lived. The real danger had just begun. The walls around them began to shift, and the air was filled with the sound of alarms. Something had triggered a defense mechanism, and the entire stronghold was now on high alert. "Move," Bonner shouted, as the team scrambled to escape the control room. They had done it. They had disabled the communication system. But now they had to survive the retaliation that was coming. Zinthar wasn't done with them. It was only getting started, and Bonner knew that this was just the beginning of a much larger battle. Bonner's heart pounded as he and his team rushed through the dark, winding corridors of the alien stronghold. The alarm blared in their ears, its shrill sound urging them to move faster, to escape before they were caught in the full force of the Zithar's retaliation. They had succeeded in their mission to disable the communication system, but that was just the first step. Now they were in the heart of enemy territory, with little chance of escape unless they acted quickly. The walls around them were alive with the glow of alien technology, their shifting patterns a constant reminder that they were deep within the very core of the Zithar Empire. Bonner's mind raced as he thought through their options. The escape route they had planned was no longer safe. Too many Zithar soldiers were on their way. They had to find another way out, and fast. "We need to get to the extraction point now," Bonner ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. The team nodded, their faces grim as they sprinted through the hallways. They could hear the distant sound of alien footfalls echoing behind them, growing louder with every second. The Zithar were closing in, and the team was running out of time. As they turned a corner, Bonner's sharp eyes caught sight of something that made his heart skip a beat. It was a door, barely visible through the flickering lights and dust. The kind of door that might lead to a hidden area, one that could give them the advantage they desperately needed. Without hesitation, he signaled for the team to stop. "We go in there," Bonner said, his voice firm. "It could be our only chance." The team didn't question him. They trusted his instincts, and he had always led them through the toughest situations. They moved quickly, entering the room one by one. The door hissed shut behind them, and for a moment they were left in total silence. The sound of their breathing was the only noise in the pitch-black room. Bonner reached for his flashlight, but before he could switch it on, the room came alive with a low hum. The walls lit up, revealing a strange alien control room. But it wasn't like anything they had seen before. The room was filled with large metallic tanks, each one containing a glowing substance that pulsed in the darkness. The air was thick with the scent of something chemical, and Bonner's instincts told him that they weren't alone. As his flashlight illuminated the room, he caught a glimpse of movement. Someone, was hiding in the shadows. Bonner tensed, his hand on his weapon. "Show yourself," he called out, his voice low and commanding. The team raised their weapons, ready for whatever threat might emerge. To their surprise, a figure stepped forward from the shadows, a human. It wasn't just any human. This man had the unmistakable look of someone who had been living under the thumb of the Zithar for years. His face was weathered, his clothes ragged, and his eyes, though full of determination, were haunted by the weight of years spent in captivity. "Who are you?" Bonner demanded, lowering his weapon slightly. His heart skipped again, but this time it was from confusion rather than fear. How could there be another human here? The Zithar had wiped out most of humanity's resistance years ago. The man gave a small, bitter laugh. "Name's Mercer," he said, his voice rough from years of disuse. "I've been here longer than I care to remember." Bonner's mind raced. "You're one of us. But how did you?" Mercer cut him off. "Doesn't matter how I got here. What matters is how you're going to get out." Bonner felt his pulse quicken. This wasn't just some lost soldier. This man had survived the Zithar's brutal regime for years, and now he was offering them a way out. But Bonner wasn't about to take anything at face value. He'd learned long ago that survival in enemy territory required skepticism. "Why should we trust you?" Bonner asked, his eyes narrowing. Mercer met his gaze without flinching. "Because we both want the same thing," he said simply. "You want to get out, and I want to see these aliens burn." Bonner studied Mercer for a long moment. He didn't know if this man was a prisoner who had given up hope or a long-lost ally who had finally broken free. But one thing was certain. He had valuable knowledge about the Zithar, and they needed all the help they could get. "All right," Bonner said finally. "We don't have much time. If you know a way out of here, now's the time to share it." Mercer nodded, his face grim. "I can get you to the central hub. The Zithar think I'm just a prisoner, but I've had years to learn their systems. I know where the weak points are, and I know how to move around undetected." Bonner's mind spun with possibilities. The central hub was the heart of the Zithar Empire. If they could reach it, they could do more damage than they ever could have imagined. But it wasn't going to be easy. The Zithar were always watching, always listening, and the closer they got to the hub, the more dangerous things would become. "We'll need to move fast," Bonner said, his voice low. "No mistakes." Mercer grinned, a hint of bitterness in his expression. "Mistakes? I don't make mistakes." With that, he turned and led the team through the hidden corridors of the alien stronghold. Bonner couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap, but at this point, they didn't have much of a choice. They had to trust Mercer if they were going to make it out alive. The deeper they went, the more Bonner could see that Mercer knew exactly what he was doing. He navigated the complex with ease, guiding them through darkened halls and hidden passages. The Zithar never suspected that one of their prisoners had turned into an ally, and it was that element of surprise that Bonner was counting on. But as they neared the central hub, the tension in the air grew thick. Every corner they turned could bring them face to face with the Zithar patrol. The stakes had never been higher. If Mercer was right, they were on the edge of something much bigger than they'd ever imagined. And if they failed, the consequences would be catastrophic. Bonner glanced at Mercer, who was leading the way, his face set with determination. For the first time in hours, Bonner allowed himself a small sense of hope. They weren't alone. And maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. The sound of their footsteps echoed through the cold, metallic hallways, a constant reminder that the Zithar were always one step away from discovering them. The deeper they traveled through the stronghold, the more intense the pressure became. Bonner felt his pulse quicken as they neared the central hub. This was it, the heart of the enemy's empire. the place where their most sensitive secrets were stored, the core of their communications, and the last line of defense for the Zithor's supremacy over the galaxy. Mercer led the team through a series of narrow corridors, his eyes constantly scanning the area, alert for any sign of movement. His face was hard, his expression betraying no emotion. Bonner had come to trust the man, but even now, as they approached the final stretch, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. They had been moving quietly for what felt like hours, their footsteps muffled by the thick, echoing silence. Bonner had trained his team for every possible scenario, but nothing could fully prepare them for the cold, oppressive atmosphere of the Zithar stronghold. The walls seemed to close in on them as they neared their destination. Bonner could almost feel the weight of the alien presence bearing down on him. Mercer stopped suddenly, holding up a hand. Bonner's instincts kicked in immediately, and he motioned for his team to halt. They had reached a large, circular door, one that led to the central hub. The moment of truth had arrived. "This is it," Mercer said quietly, his voice low. "Once we go in there, there's no turning back." Bonner nodded, his mind racing. He knew that this was the moment where everything would either fall into place or come crashing down. The Zithar had been watching them, tracking their every move. They would be ready for them. "We breach the door, we plant the charge, and we get out," Bonner said, his voice firm. "No heroics, no taking risks. We're in and out, understood?" The team nodded, their faces determined. They had come this far, and they weren't going to stop now. Bonner gave a quick signal, and within seconds, the team was in position. Mercer activated a hidden panel on the side of the door, and with a soft hiss, the massive metal door began to slide open. The room beyond was filled with rows of glowing consoles and strange alien machinery. The hum of the systems filled the air, and the walls were adorned with alien symbols that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. But there was no time to take in the sights. Bonner's eyes immediately scanned the room, focusing on the central console. If they were going to disable the Zithar's communication system, that was where they had to go. But as they moved deeper into the room, a low voice echoed through the chamber. "You think you can defeat us?" The voice was cold, calculated, and unmistakably Zithar. Bonner froze. The voice was coming from everywhere and nowhere all at once. It was the AI, Zithar, the Zithar overlord, the entity that controlled the Empire. Bonner's stomach tightened. He had expected this, but hearing it now, in the heart of their stronghold, made it all the more real. "We've been watching you," Zithar continued, its voice sending a chill down Bonner's spine. "Every move you make, every plan you devise. You are insignificant. You are nothing." Bonner clenched his fists. He had heard this before. The Zithar had always underestimated humanity, always considered them to be inferior. But Bonner knew better. Humanity had always been at its best when the odds were stacked against them. "We're not here to talk," Bonner said, his voice calm but firm. "We're here to destroy your empire." The room seemed to shift. The walls began to glow brighter, and Bonner could feel the air grow heavy. Zinthar's presence was everywhere, and it was like an invisible hand squeezing the life out of the room. But Bonner didn't flinch. He had faced worse, and he would face this too. The central console flickered, and a hologram of the Zithar overlord materialized in the center of the room. It was a massive glowing figure, its features shifting like liquid metal, its eyes glowing a bright, unnatural blue. "You cannot defeat me," Zithar said, its voice like thunder. "I control everything. I am the future. You are nothing more than a dying race." Bonner took a step forward, his hand on his weapon. He was ready for the fight. But Mercer stepped in front of him, his face determined. "No," Mercer said, his voice steady. "You've underestimated them for too long. Humanity is the one thing you can't control. You've been watching us, but you never understood us. You never understood what makes us fight." Zinthar's hologram flickered, its digital eyes narrowing. "You think you can change anything. The Empire is eternal. "No," Mercer said, his voice a whisper, but with a power that made the room feel like it was shaking. "It's you who is the one who's been forgotten." Mercer pulled a small device from his belt, activating it with a single press. There was a flash of light, and suddenly, the walls of the room seemed to pulse with energy. The entire room was humming now, vibrating with an intensity that Bonner could feel in his chest. The Zithar systems were failing. Zinthar's hologram flickered again, its form glitching as the devices around the room began to overload. "No, this cannot be." Bonner didn't waste a second. He rushed forward, grabbing the central console and plugging the device into the main terminal. A series of beeps and flashes erupted as the system began to go offline. The lights flickered, the humming grew louder, and for a brief moment, Bonner thought they might have won. But then the entire room began to shake. A loud, mechanical roar filled the air as Zinthar's last line of defense activated. Massive metal doors began to slam shut, and Bonner knew they were running out of time. "Move! Move!" Bonner shouted to his team, grabbing Mercer's arm and pulling him towards the exit. The room was falling apart, the Zithar systems fighting to stay alive. The clash of wills was over. Now, they had to survive the aftermath. The room shook violently as Bonner and his team sprinted down the collapsing corridor, the sounds of metal groaning and alarms blaring all around them. The Zithar had activated their last line of defense, and the stronghold was coming apart at the seams. Every second counted, and they needed to get out before the entire facility imploded under the weight of its own destruction. The walls vibrated with the force of energy surging through the alien technology, and Bonner could feel the ground beneath his boots tremble. It was like the heart of the machine itself was beating, trying to tear everything apart in a desperate attempt to survive. But there was no stopping it now. They had planted the charge, they had crippled the Zithar systems, and they had set in motion the end of the Empire. The heart of the machine was failing. "Keep moving," Bonner yelled, his voice barely audible over the chaos. The team followed closely behind, their weapons raised, their eyes scanning the darkness ahead for any sign of danger. Mercer led the way, his face grim but resolute, knowing that the only way out was through the heart of the machine itself. The Zithar overlords had built this place as their ultimate fortress, a symbol of their dominance over the galaxy. But now it was crumbling, and they were caught in the middle of it. The countdown was ticking, and Bonner knew that they were running out of time. As they reached another set of doors, Mercer paused, his hand resting on the control panel. The doors slid open with a hiss, revealing a vast chamber beyond. It was unlike anything Bonner had ever seen. The room was a massive network of glowing cables and alien technology, pulsating with energy. It was the nerve center of the entire stronghold, the heart of the machine. "This is it," Mercer said, his voice low. "This is where it all started, where the Zithar's power flows from. If we destroy this, we take them down for good." Bonner felt a cold chill run down his spine. This was the core, the very essence of the Zithar's control over their empire. If they failed here, everything they had fought for would be in vain. The stakes had never been higher. "Plant the charges," Bonner ordered, his voice steady despite the pressure mounting around them. His team moved quickly, setting up the explosives along the network of cables and consoles. Mercer stood watch, his eyes constantly scanning for any sign of the Zithar's counterattack. As the team worked, Bonner couldn't help but take in the sheer scale of the room. It was a marvel of alien design, with towering columns of energy flowing through the cables, illuminating the entire chamber in an eerie, pulsating light. The walls seemed to hum with power, and Bonner could almost feel the weight of the Zithar's technology pressing down on him. But there was no time for awe. The charges were set, and they needed to get out. Bonner looked at Mercer, who was already moving toward the exit, his face hard with determination. They had come this far, and there was no turning back now. "Everyone, fall back," Bonner shouted. The team turned, quickly making their way toward the door they had entered through. But as they moved, Bonner's heart skipped a beat. A low, rumbling sound filled the chamber, followed by a high-pitched whine that seemed to pierce through the air. The Zithar were activating something powerful. "We're not out yet," Bonner shouted, his voice urgent. "Move faster." The rumble grew louder, and Bonner could hear the distinct sound of footsteps approaching from behind. The Zithar had discovered their location, and they were coming to stop them. The pressure of the collapsing stronghold wasn't the only thing they had to worry about now. The Zithar were desperate, and they would do anything to prevent their downfall. As the team reached the exit, Bonner saw the Zithar soldiers rounding the corner, their alien forms moving with unnatural speed. They were armed, and they were ready to fight. The tension in the air was thick, and Bonner knew that this would be the moment that decided everything. Either they would escape, or they would be caught in the final confrontation. "Hold them off," Bonner ordered, as he drew his weapon and fired a shot at the nearest Zithar soldier. The bullet struck with a resounding thud, but the alien didn't go down. Instead, it turned and fired back, sending a beam of energy streaking through the air. The team returned fire, but the Zithar were relentless. They had the numbers, and they had the firepower. Bonner knew that they couldn't afford to get bogged down here. The longer they stayed, the more likely they were to be overwhelmed. "We can't stay here," Bonner yelled. "Keep moving." The team fought their way through the hail of fire, pushing forward with every step. Bonner's mind was racing. They had set the charges, but they weren't going to make it out unless they could hold off the Zithar long enough to give the explosives time to detonate. The Zithar soldiers were closing in fast, their movements coordinated and precise. Bonner's team was outnumbered and outgunned, but they weren't about to back down. They fought with everything they had, every ounce of training and every drop of adrenaline pushing them forward. Bonner could see the exit just ahead, but the Zithar were too close. He turned to Mercer, who was already moving toward the door. "Go," Bonner shouted. "I'll hold them off." Mercer hesitated, but Bonner gave him a sharp nod. There was no time for second-guessing. Mercer and the rest of the team made a run for the exit, leaving Bonner to fight alone. Bonner's heart raced as he fired another round at the advancing Zithar, trying to slow them down long enough for the team to escape. The room was filling with the sound of gunfire and explosions, and Bonner could feel the heat of the Zithar's energy blasts searing the air around him. The countdown was nearing its end, and Bonner knew that if they didn't escape now, everything they had fought for would be for nothing. He turned and ran toward the exit, his legs pumping as fast as they could carry him. The Zithar were right behind him, but Bonner pushed through the pain, his eyes fixed on the door. They were almost there. With one final burst of energy, Bonner dove through the door just as the explosion erupted behind him. The shockwave hit him like a punch to the chest, but he didn't stop. He was out, and the Zithar stronghold was collapsing in on itself. Bonner looked up at the sky above him, his heart still racing. They had done it. They had reached the heart of the machine, and they had destroyed it. The Zithar Empire was crumbling. The galaxy was free, and as the dust settled, Bonner knew that humanity had finally proven what they were capable of. They were no longer the underdogs. They were the ones who had brought down the greatest power the galaxy had ever known. The sun was setting over the barren planet, its fading light casting long shadows over the ruins of the Zithar stronghold. The ground shook slightly as the last remnants of the alien empire crumbled beneath the weight of the explosives Bonner and his team had set. For a moment, the world stood still. The battle was over, and the silence that followed felt almost unreal. The air was thick with dust, and the once mighty fortress that had stood as a symbol of the Zithar's control now lay in ruin. Bonner stood at the edge of the wreckage, his eyes scanning the horizon. His heart still pounded in his chest, but the adrenaline that had fueled him through the fight was starting to wear off. He had fought hard, lost comrades along the way, and come face to face with the greatest force in the galaxy. And now, as he looked out at the devastation, he could finally breathe a little easier. It wasn't victory in the traditional sense. There had been sacrifices, too many to count. But humanity had won. Against all odds, they had toppled an empire that had once believed itself invincible. And that was something no one would ever forget. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. He turned to see Mercer and the rest of the team walking toward him. Their faces were marked with exhaustion, but there was a look of relief in their eyes. They had made it. They had survived. "Bonner," Mercer called as he neared. "You did it. We did it." Bonner gave a small, tired smile. "We all did." He turned to look back at the destruction, his mind racing through everything that had led them to this moment. The fight had been long, and the odds had been stacked against them at every turn. But they had kept going, pushing forward even when the Zithar seemed unstoppable. And now, their persistence had paid off. The team gathered around him, each member reflecting the same sense of disbelief. They had just taken down an empire that had ruled with an iron fist for centuries. There were no more Zithar ships in the sky, no more alien forces marching across the galaxy. The Zithar, the greatest threat humanity had ever known, were no more. "What's next?" one of the soldiers asked, looking at Bonner with a mixture of exhaustion and hope. Bonner looked up at the stars, his gaze steady. "Next, we rebuild. We bring our people together, and we ensure that what happened here never happens again. But for now, we rest. We've earned that much." The journey ahead would be difficult. There would be countless challenges, and the galaxy would need time to heal. But humanity had proven its strength. Against overwhelming odds, they had found a way to fight back, and that was something no one could take from them. Mercer gave a nod. "You've earned it, Bonner. We all have." Bonner glanced at the wreckage of the Zithar stronghold one last time. It felt surreal to be standing here, knowing that the war was over. The thought of all the lives that had been lost weighed heavily on him, but he knew they had not died in vain. They had fought for something greater, something worth fighting for. The Zithar's reign had come to an end, and humanity had emerged stronger because of it. The team gathered together, their bond forged through the trials they had faced. Bonner had seen them grow over the course of the mission, each one stepping up when it mattered most. They were no longer just soldiers, they were heroes. And though they had been outmatched at every turn, they had never given up. They had never stopped fighting. As the sun dipped lower on the horizon, Bonner couldn't help but think of all the people they had left behind. The families, the friends, the ones who had supported them from afar. They had done this for them, and now it was time to return home, to the people who had never stopped believing in them. The journey to the Zithar stronghold had been long and treacherous, but the journey back would be just as significant. The war was over, but the work was far from finished. The galaxy was broken, and it would take years to rebuild what had been lost. But humanity would be the ones to do it. As Bonner and his team made their way back to the transport ship, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. They had faced impossible odds, and yet they had triumphed. The victory wasn't just about defeating the Zithar. It was about proving that humanity had the strength to stand up to the darkness, to face the unknown and come out on the other side. It was about hope, perseverance, and unity. They had done what many thought was impossible. They had brought down an empire, not with sheer force, but with determination, courage, and the will to fight for something greater than themselves. And in doing so, they had proven that humanity was far stronger than anyone had ever realized. As they boarded the ship, Bonner looked back at the destroyed stronghold, the once unstoppable empire, now nothing more than a pile of rubble. The sky was darkening, but there was a sense of calm that Bonner had never felt before. For the first time in a long while, the future felt bright. He knew there would be challenges ahead, and not everything would be easy. But for the first time in years, Bonner allowed himself to believe in the impossible. He had seen humanity rise from the ashes, had seen them overcome the odds, and now he knew that there was no limit to what they could accomplish. Humanity had triumphed, and nothing would ever be the same.